Good morning, everyone. Garnett here. It's day something of this quarantine, and I'm up early and I'm gonna make scones. So thought you might enjoy watching me do this. Okay, so let's have a look at the ingredients I have. Starting with flour, I have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour and 1/4 cup of sugar. And then to that, we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. For my spices, I have 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of ginger, ground ginger. You can use any spices that you have on hand though. 5 tablespoons of cold butter that's been cut into small pieces. Very important that it's cold. I have 1 whole lemon. And then I have about 3/4 of a cup of liquid. I mixed yogurt and whole milk because that's what I have, but you could use heavy cream if you have heavy cream. And we may or may not use that entire amount of liquid, but I like to have a little bit extra on hand just in case. I'm adding to my scones dried currants. I have 1/4 cup, but you could use raisins or cranberries or anything that you have. And I have 1/4 cup of walnuts here. But again, if you have almonds or pecans, that would be nice as well. I have a really large bowl, and one of the tricks that I do when I'm baking is to take a fine mesh strainer like this, and I run my dry ingredients through the strainer. So we're gonna add our flour in here, along with the baking powder, baking soda, and our dry spices. And by straining the flour, it's going to give us a lighter texture in the finished product, but it's also going to help incorporate these dry ingredients together. I'm going to add in a pinch of salt, just like this. That's it. Our 1/4 cup of sugar, okay? And give this a stir, just to make sure everything is nice and together. All right, so dump all the butter in at this point. This is the fun part. You want to take your tips of your fingers and just mix in the butter into the flour until everything's incorporated and we have almost like a crumb type texture. Okay, so I have all of the butter mixed into the flour. At this point, I'm going to add in the currants and also the walnuts. But again, whatever you have is fine. We'll just give that a little toss. And then I'm going to take my lemon and I'm going to put the zest in because I love lemon zest in scones. And again, we're only using that outer part of the fruit, not the white part underneath the skin. Okay? So this is a zest of about 1 lemon. And you would be amazed how much flavor fruit zest can add to something, especially when baking. I'm going to set this aside, and I'm also going to use the juice of part of this lemon as well. So we're going to add that in here. Okay. Perfect. And last but not least, we have our liquid. And so this is where you're going to have to use a little judgment. Don't put it all in at once, okay? Because we don't want the liquid of a scone to be too wet. But again, we don't want it to be too dry either. So I'm going to add about 1/2 of this liquid to start. And I'm going to give it a little toss, and I'll be able to tell right away if we're going to need to add a little more or not. I'm going to add a little more. Okay. And that looks pretty good. And I'll just go ahead and add a little bit more in there. So it looks like we got the liquid portion pretty spot on, which was around 3/4 of a cup of liquid for 1.5 cups of flour. So it's an easy way to remember. Okay, so there's 1 or 2 ways to do this at this point with baking. You can take just a spoon, and if you want a rough looking scone, you could just lay them on a sheet pan like this and bake them just like that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. I do that all the time. If you want a more formal shaped scone, this is what I might do. I use parchment paper on my countertop for a couple of reasons. Number one, it helps things not stick, but the other reason is it keeps my mess kind of confined to this, and then when I'm done I can just pull this up and throw it away. Okay, we're gonna form a little bit of a circle here. Sprinkle the top slightly with flour and just lightly press down on the mixture until you have as good of a circle as you can get here. Another trick you could do here is to lay another sheet of parchment paper over and then flatten it, and it won't stick. I'm not using a rolling pin or anything because we don't need to, but you could if you like to. I might even take my cutting board from earlier and just press down on it to get an even height on everything. Okay, pull this off, and we've got our scone mixture now in a nice round circle. And all we're going to do at this point is cut this into little pie shapes. Okay, so I'll go down the middle here, and then I'll go across here, across on the other side. Okay, and then we'll do 8 pie shapes here. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do is sprinkle the top with sugar. Like that. And then at this point, I will throw this in the refrigerator because I want this to be very cold before I bake it. So I'm probably going to let it cool in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. Okay, so we're back, and I just took the scones out of the refrigerator. I'm going to show you here. I have them on a sheet pan with a silpat. And at this point, I'm going to put them in my oven, which I preheated to 400 degrees. And I'm going to cook them for about 20 to 25 minutes. Of course, everybody's oven is different. But just keep an eye on them, maybe check them after 15 minutes. And again, I like scones to be a little bit on the dry side, a little bit brown. So here we go, we're gonna throw them in the oven. All right, our scones are out of the oven, and they look nice and slightly browned, which is the way I like them. And what we're gonna do is come over here, and I'm gonna put them on a platter. Just arrange them however you like. And the only other step I'm going to take here is something that my kids love, and that's powdered sugar. So we dust the top with powdered sugar. And that's it. I'm gonna hold these up to the camera so you can see. So now the best part, we get to eat, and I have my beautiful walnut and currant scone and a little cappuccino as well. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed making scones with me today. See you next time. Cheers.